Well, John, thank you for hanging out here. I know this is not the most comfortable thing for you. You are a writer and not necessarily comfortable with just talking, and then especially all that's going on. Some of these subject matters are really close to home. So thank you for being willing to do this, and um, thank you. I mean, you've been part of this family for a long time now. I mean, I remember you first joined us through AmeriCorps, and
Hmm.
I was like, well, he'll probably just do his term and then he's gone because, I mean, he's got his degree, and I guess it's in English is the official, but it's
Hmm.
more that creative writing and those kind of things is your specialty. I'm like, well, he'll be moving on and on. And somewhere along the lines, you developed this passion for these kids. So just tell us a little bit about where you come from, your background.
So I'm from North Little Rock. That's what I always tell people. I grew up kind of between Little Rock and North Little Rock. From what I remember, uh, I was born, I guess, in North Little Rock, and we moved to Little Rock when I was probably about 7 or 8, and I did school there for a year or two. When we moved back to North Little Rock, we were staying like on Pike Avenue, so that's mainly like where I grew up at, and like where a lot of my friends and a lot of my experiences have come from. So um, I just feel that when I got here, I definitely was here because I wanted to serve. I wanted to do like something that I felt would benefit the community here. I wanted to give back to my community because when I was here, there were always people um, who came to our community to help us. Like the churches, food organizations. Like you guys have been doing this for a long time, so. Uh, I feel like I always had a passion to do it. I just wanted to know where I wanted to do it. And I thought there was no better place to doing it right here where I'm from.
And how in the world did you kind of develop that passion for writing and poetry and those kind of things? Where did that stem from?
Uh, I guess I mean it all starts like with my brother. He got me writing like rap songs, and I was probably like 11 or 12, right? And so when I was in 5th grade at Boone Park, I entered a poetry competition, and my grandma was like loved the poem and like still has it like under her bed like in like a little sheet full, and the poem was just like a poem about how I felt I was, and so it started with poetry and music, and I just loved the way that you could get words to rhyme, and where you could get words to have like a rhythm to it, and like you could sing to it, you could rap to it, you can make it like be whatever you want. You could talk about yourself, you could talk about your experiences. Um, so poetry or writing for me is like an expression of like my experiences. It's obviously artistic, and it's obviously something that's rigorous and that you have to practice a lot to get better at. Like even the most famous writers, like their first books weren't like bestsellers. Take them like that one bad book, and then they kind of broke through after that and saw where they had to develop. Um, so yeah, I definitely think it started with my brother and my mom. Like I remember her like having like these really neatly written. It's like that's like the neatest cursive handwriting I've ever seen, and I still can't do it. So I like we learned cursive when I was in 3rd or 4th grade, and I just couldn't do it. I just couldn't get it to look as nice as hers, and I really wanted it to. But so she has like great handwriting and always like write like these really nice notes and letters for us like on the fridge like for like what we need to do and things like that. So I guess it just started with my family just really encouraging me to do like just do anything like creative. So
And one thing I know, because I have been on your SoundCloud, I have heard and read more of your stuff than you probably are aware of, but there's a lot of rawness in and especially a lot of your stuff on SoundCloud.
hmm
And the John I know is this really meek, kind of quiet, laid back. When the opportunity goes, I mean, you jump right in with a kid and you're patient in all of this. Talk about where a lot of these feelings come from, and I know that a lot of your poetry is an outlet of how
hmm
you process this, but just where's all that from?
A lot of music is just or hip hop music. in the Black community is just a outlet or expression of our surroundings, I would say. And so a lot of that is just expressing like my surroundings. And sometimes maybe I was telling my little brother the other day because he actually is also a rapper right now, and like is actually like a really well, really good at it. And he's just like he's good at marketing himself too. So that's one thing I feel like I'm not that great at is the marketing aspect, but he's been great at putting himself out there. But for me, it's I just have a lot of experiences I've had like growing up. I've had family members who have been in prison. I've like had experiences where I found guns in the house, and like I don't know where they come from, but I've had experiences like that, and I just want to relay those experiences so other people know or other kids know that um, it doesn't matter where you come from. You can come from the worst circumstances, and you can make that into something that's artistic and creative. Um, and I guess some people will probably say it's not like an encouraging thing. I think the word you said was is rawness, and that's really what hip hop is supposed to be about. It's supposed to be something that's like in your face, and it's supposed to be something that's unabashed and like unashamed. Like it is what it is. And a lot of things like about where I come from, like the language is probably not the cleanest, but like growing up, I didn't hear a lot of clean language. I'm not saying that to shame anybody, just that that's just the
Hmm.
environment. And so like I was watching talking about a video I saw yesterday with Calf where this little girl was like crying when her mom gets home, and the mom is like asking her, it's like on Instagram, asking her like what she said, and she like said like told her sister like some bad words, and she said please don't whoop me or whatever, and I always say that the kids are always getting it from the parents, right? So like that little girl is saying those words, and it's probably just because she's heard it
Hmm.
before, and she's just regurgitating, repeating what she's heard, and so I don't think that she's wrong because she doesn't really understand why she shouldn't say it. She just knows, oh, those are adult words that I don't say anymore.
I think that there's something really kind of important there that maybe you can shed some light on. So there's a social psychologist named Ruby Payne, and she
Mm-hmm.
talks about really breaks it down the socioeconomic. So it's a person in the middle class might have a vocabulary, let's just say 15,000 words or 20,000 words or whatever it is. And when they argue that they've got a lot of words they can use to communicate. When the wealthy argue, they just hire a lawyer who speaks Latin and whatever else and has a million words. But a lot of children that grow up in a disadvantaged community, they have a smaller vocabulary
Mm-hmm.
and they don't know how to express themselves. They they struggle with that and they go back to those four letter expletives because that's what they know. And
Mm-hmm.
um, it's actually in some of the stuff that she writes. It's when a child runs out of words, they run to fists quicker. I mean, talk about that a little bit, kind of what it's meant to you, because you have a great vocabulary,
Mm-hmm.
how that kind of developed and those kind of things,
Um,
or what you even think about that if it's totally off base in your opinion.
I've definitely seen that with a lot of our kids here at the Dream Center too. Is that they don't really know how to process their emotions, um, and I'm also really bad at that. In all honesty, like sometimes I just need to just be quiet and just like take a step away and just like really understand like process what I'm feeling and why I'm feeling it. And so I think the big reason for a lot of our kids is why, or why we're feeling a certain way, or why we want to fight, why we want to get angry. And sometimes where we come from, violence is the only answer, right? So when you get angry at somebody, the only thing you know is I'm going to fight them, I'm going to punch them, all right, and that and it just escalates. So there's at no point in time are a lot of people taught the escalation methods. Um, like growing up, I got into a lot of like kids ask me all the time, "Did you get into fights growing up?" I'm like, "Yeah, I did." I got into fights. Sometimes I started it, sometimes I didn't. I never really went out looking for it, but it was just like we're in a neighborhood where you're the main thing that matters is how tough you are. Your
Mhm.
character. That's what your character is determined. That's how people won't mess with you. It's based on how tough you are. All right. If you people know you get into fights and you win your fights, people will leave you alone. They won't mess with you. People won't bully you. So for a lot of kids, that's also like a way to scare away bullies. So um, that being said, I think the reason I like have such a large vocabulary because my family say the same thing about me. It's like uh, whenever my little brother listens to my music, he's like, "You use so many big words. Like I don't know, like he's like, you use big words and like, but you always like make it go together and you make it sound good." And I'm just like, um, it's just because I read a lot of books. Like literally, I was that kid who always had like a book like this thick. I used to read like Aragon, like fantasy, anything that like was just a little challenging or something that was cool or interesting. But like literally, just reading books, I think, is one of the things that I feel like will help most of our kids like get a larger vocabulary and just get more exposure to more words because a lot of those words that I feel like I've learned have like were in my teen or the preteen years, like in high school, and so um, yeah, I think that kids need to read more. The hard part about that is a lot of our kids are behind in their reading levels or
Mhm.
behind in where they're at. I was always ahead when I was in school, like in terms of my reading, just like because I like to do it and I was really um, inspired to do it. Uh, but I feel like once kids get that confidence in themselves that they can read and they get that confidence, like, all right, I don't know this word, I can just go look it up. And then once they like, there's power in that knowing things that learning things every day, like learning a new word every day. And so I just always felt like language was a form of power that you could have. Like
Mhm.
being able to speak well was something that could get you further in life. So
So one of the statistics that Fitz was talking to us about is if a kid is below grade level reading in third grade, they actually can use that statistic to predict the likelihood of that school to prison pipeline.
mm-hmm,
What's the likelihood of how many beds we're going to need in prison
mm-hmm,
and different things like that, all correlated back to the one skill reading. And you said you had some family members that have experienced prison,
mm-hmm,
um, and we've got some of our kids that it breaks my heart that I'm looking at their, I mean, they're teenagers and they're going to spend the rest of their lives in prison.
mm-hmm,
Um, what is it that you think in looking at this? It's a systemic problem
mm-hmm.
when we look at it. I mean, how in the world do we kind of get over it? What can we do, whether it's in our schools, whether it's in our families, whether it's in after school programs, to really get kids to realize that there's a lot of value right now in, like what you said, reading and
Mm-hmm.
just reading and just reading and kind of getting into that world.
I would tell them like don't be discouraged when people make fun of you, because that happened to me a lot growing up. Like when you're a smart person or a smart kid, one thing I heard a lot growing up was you talk white, like literally, like, and that's something for me that like kind of hurts. It
Mm-hmm.
does. It hurts a little bit. Like people say you talk white, but I'm just like I just feel like that was just a product of me reading so much. In all honesty, it was just a product of me um, exposing myself to different people. And so I think a lot of times, I'm sure you heard the word echo chamber. We get caught in an echo chamber, and we only want to hear the things that are like us. We want to talk to people that sound like us, and we don't really expose ourselves to any other things. So I would just say just read different things. Like don't you don't have to read all the same things. Like read things that are maybe weird. Read things that are graphic. Like graphic novels right now for kids are like blowing up. So any
Mm-hmm.
like graphic novel um, is something that's cool. Um, I would say like just yeah, that's don't get discouraged like when kids bully you because honestly like the smart kids are labeled nerds or geeks or they get these labels and that discourages kids from wanting to like be more open about like oh I'm actually intelligent, I'm actually kind of smart, and like if their parents encourage those kids like you're really smart, you're really intelligent, yeah, don't worry about what people are saying about you, just keep doing what you're doing and you're going to be successful. um, I think sometimes parents want to deter kids from that route because they don't want their kids to not be like them, right? So they don't want their kids to talk white. I don't want my kid to talk white because, and I don't know what that problem is. I don't know why, because the idea is that we all want to be educated. We all want to know our history. We all want to be able to find information out so we can make more informed decisions. And we all want our kids to succeed past where we probably have reached in life. Um, so I would just say, like, yeah, don't be discouraged, and just like those labels that people give you, like, they don't matter. Like, when you, at the end of the day, if you're a CEO of a company, who matters what you were called in seventh or sixth grade, right? I mean, at the end of the day, if you are an NFL player, and because you did all your schoolwork, who matters where people are like, oh yeah, he was always in his books. But like, just do what you feel like you need to do, and really don't worry about what other people are saying about you. So
And let's kind of touch on a little bit of what you were kind of talking about earlier that I think is an interesting thing of, oh, you talk white. And I know that we've had several politicians, especially recently, that have said, you watch them on TV and it's like all of a sudden they adapt to their speaking
mm-hmm.
more black. And it's created a lot of controversy in that. What is kind of like your experience with anything like that that is.
I was just the term for it, and I learned this from my friend Kendrick. It's called code switching, and it's very real. There's a movie right now on Hulu, and I forget the name, but the actor is Lakeith Stanford,
Okay.
and it's a comedy. It's really funny, and he literally like masters the white voice. Like he's a telecommunicator, and he like calls people, and he like breaks out his white voice on the phone. But it's very real because like um, there's been studies I've done, I think, about like people about landlords who like get applicants, and that they're more likely to show houses to applicants who sound white over the phone than applicants who sound black over the phone. And I just think that it's just something that isn't right. I don't think like you can sound a certain race. Like, I personally don't think that. Like, I definitely think if you're from a certain area, you talk a certain way.
No.
Um, and but we all do it. It's very it's subconscious. We don't think about it. Like, we when we get around a certain family, like, we talk a certain way. I had a friend in that I met when I was serving in the Dominican, and she was Jamaican. But like, when I talked to her, she just sounded American. But she was like she was a second generation Jamaican Canadian. And I was like, so like, what does your family talk like? I was just curious, and like, she was like, literally just broke out like her Jamaican accent. I'm just like, oh, like, but I mean, it happens, it just depends on the context you're in. And I'm not saying it's right or it's wrong. I feel like people should just be accepted by however they talk. I don't feel like the way you talk really denotes like an educational level either. One of my favorite people ever was Tupac, and like, he was very raw, but he was also very intelligent.
Mhm.
If you watch any of his interviews where he's like actually talking about the systems, um, he was like the most articulate person you could ever meet. But if you watch him in movies or listen to his music, you think, oh, like, this guy's just like angry, right?
Mhm.
But he was that was his emotion. That was the product of his environment of growing up where he grew up. And he was also speaking not only for him, he was speaking for all those other people who listened to him, and who he was representing from his communities.
There's another study in a book called Freakonomics, and it actually takes the same concept you talked about with landlords,
Mm-hmm.
and not their language, but names
Mm-hmm.
and job applicants with names. And so a guy by the name of John
Mm-hmm.
is going to get a job with an equal resume quicker than someone with more of an ethnic name.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of interesting how in the job market, how you communicate, and then even down to your name, statistically creates a disadvantage to some and an advantage to others. Um, and one of the things that I really wanted to kind of nail down with you were, right now there's a lot of hot button issues going on, but you had an experience recently that impacted me. And I'm gonna share kind of my personal experience with the police.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I got pulled over. I didn't have insurance in my car, and the police officer said, "Hey, I'm going to give you a ticket, but you just go to the judge and they'll take care of this when you provide proof." And I go to the judge, and I know the judge, and he dismisses everything. And never once did I fear, never once did I have any concerns.
Mm-hmm.
And you are a very mannerly person. You're not a kind of guy that um, is going to jump out and
Mm-hmm.
attack or even make wild, crazy movements. But your story, and you articulated it so well in writing, was totally different recently when you got pulled over. So,
Mm-hmm.
do you mind just kind of describing that?
Um, yeah. So I was driving my mom's car, and I was going to pick her and my brothers up from work on university. I got pulled over on Camp Robinson. Uh, so obviously, you get pulled over on a busy road, you pull all the way off. I pulled it like literally all the way off the road, like to the point where I was like in the bank parking lot. Um, there was a female officer who came up to my driver window, and I gave her my driver's license. I had it ready. I got the registration out the glove box. I gave that to her, and she asked me for the insurance. Or no, the registration wasn't in the car. I wasn't sure where it was, and I told her frankly, I was like, I'm not sure where this is. Like, this is my mom's car. I don't know where she keeps things in here. I was like, it's not in the glove box. And the officer asked me, she's like, well, could you just call her and ask her where it's at? And so I called her. At that point, there was another officer at my passenger door, um, and he kind of like knocked on the roof and was asking the officer at my driver door to ask me to roll down my passenger window. And I was like, no, I'm okay. And he was like, and she was like, excuse me. I was like, I'm okay. And so I feel like that little defiance may have made it seem like I was not being compliant to the officers. This is what I'm assuming. And so at a certain point, I'm on the phone with my mom, with my little brother, because he had her phone. And I'm like, hey, can you ask mom where her registration is in the car and insurance, because I can't find it. Um, and so then he opened my door, and I was just like kind of surprised. I was like, I mean, I don't know if that's legal or not, but like, why are you opening my
Mm-hmm.
door? And so he started like looking inside of the car, like towards my feet and around my seat and in the passenger floor. And so I was like, could you close my door, please? And he just like he didn't say anything to me. He just was looking at me. And so at that point, I started to get a little nervous. I just put my hands on the wheel. It's just like, all right, I'm just not gonna do anything until you. I mean, I'm literally not gonna do anything because like this guy's like making me very nervous. And so at that point, I think they called in another cruiser. Two other officers showed up.
So now, I mean, I don't even know why she pulled you over, but you've got
Uh,
four officers around you now.
oh, sorry. She told me that the reason she pulled me over is because we had temporary tags on the
Okay.
car and they were expired. Um, and so at that point, another cruiser showed up, and immediately I can see the officer in my passenger window make a motion to another officer who had just showed up, and he was telling him to pull me out the car. It's just what like the officer told me, and I was like, all right. They was like, all right, can you step out of the car, please? I said, well, what did I do? They said, step out of the car, please. What did I do? And so at that point, also I was on the phone, and my mom was like telling me where the documents were in the car. And so I was like going to ask her if I could reach for them because they were in like a spot in the car where they probably might get a little nervous for somebody to be reaching. And so they pulled me out of the car. I was like, well, what did I do? And they didn't say anything. All right. So they put me in handcuffs. They told me to turn around actually, and like said, and I was like, all right, so I'm getting handcuffed. I didn't realize I was gonna get handcuffed either to that point. I was like, all right, I just figured like y'all are gonna step me out and ask me some questions, but um, they handcuffed me. I asked them if I could keep my phone because my mom was on the phone with me, and uh, and I kind of wanted to record because I wasn't really sure what was going to happen, and I could see that they didn't have any body cameras that would actually hold them accountable for what was happening. So I asked if I could keep my phone, and the officer was like, "No, let it go." I said, "I would like to keep my phone," He said, no. I said, can I keep my phone? And he had my wrist like this, and he like started to like kind of twist my wrist really hard, and I just let it go because I was like, I don't want to. I'm not
Mhm.
gonna get hurt over something so silly. Like, and the officer was like 6 feet and 200 something pounds. Like, and I'm a small
Mhm.
guy, right? Um, so they put me in handcuffs. They walked me away from the car. They left all my doors open. The car was running. My mom was on the phone. She didn't know what was happening. Uh, and at that point, they really still wouldn't give me any information. At that point, I was a little mad, and I was probably not acting the way I probably should. Um, and so the officer patted me down, and obviously to see if I had any weapons or anything. Um, and then they just kind of stood me there, and um, they were asking me for the registration, and I said, my mom had told me where the registration was. I said, well, could I go to the car and get it? No, we're gonna get it for you. I said, well, I'm not consenting to a search. Well, if you don't consent to a search, we're gonna tow your car because you don't have the registration. I said, well, I've been compliant up to this point, and I would really like to not have my car towed. If you would let me out of the handcuffs, I will go get it for you. No, we will get it for you. Okay, well, we're at an impasse here because you've already infringed on my rights, and I don't want to allow you to infringe more on my rights by searching my car. Um, and so they were at that point. They said, "Well, we're just going to tow the car." I said, "All right." And at that point, they gave me back my phone so I can inform my mother what had happened. Like they're towing the car. She doesn't get any of the context of what had
Mhm.
happened, and so she says, and so he was like, "Well, we're just going to tow the car." I said, "All right." Um, and that was just kind of what happened. And so um, the officers at that point like were not even like looking at me in the eye, couldn't look me in the face. They wrote me a ticket for expired tags. Uh, there was a lady officer. She kind of like finished it out with um, the ticket or whatever. I was the guy who came and towed our car. I asked him if I could ride along because I was just gonna go to wherever it was and just pay for it to be taken out of the impound. And the guy was like, "It's closed." It's like, okay, so that's another inconvenience I have. It's like, all right, well, that's not gonna work. And so the officers just kind of stood there, and I was like, well, I mean, you guys mind giving me a ride home? And they just like looked at me like, just looked at me. And I was like, and then they drove off, and they drove past at least twice, just looking at me. And I just called an Uber and took an Uber home. And so I filed a complaint. Uh, I thought it wasn't right personally. Um, it's just I don't know. It's like I can't say that that's been my experience with every cop, right? I haven't every time I've been pulled over, and I've been pulled over quite a few times. Like I can't say like I've been pulled out of handcuffs, right? There's been I got pulled over once coming to the Dream Center, right? It was right over here under this underpass, and for the same reason, my tags were expired, and I didn't notice. I really didn't. Um, and the officer like let me know like where your tags are expired. Where are you going? And I was like, I'm going down the road to the Dream Center. All right. Well, I'm gonna have to write you a ticket. And I was like, oh man, I was like a little upset. He was like, well, I could tow it. I was like, all right, cool. He's like, just go park it, and I don't want to see you driving it today. And so I came here, and Zach gave me a ride to the revenue office, and I handled it right.
Mhm.
I was like, well, I don't want to get pulled over again, so I'm just gonna go handle this. I've been pulled over when I was in Russellville. An officer told me I was going X speed, and I was like fairly certain. I was like I wasn't going that fast, and I was just like told him frankly like I wasn't going that fast, and he was like just wrote me a warning. So like I definitely feel that there's a feeling that black people have whenever a cop gets behind you,
Mhm.
and it's just a feeling that um, that's a little too familiar, right? It's just that I'm always concerned with, well, are they gonna pull me over? Like every time, like doesn't matter if I'm doing the right thing, doesn't matter if all my papers are right, doesn't matter if anything. But like if a police car gets behind me, I'm thinking, are they gonna pull me over? And that's what happened in that instance too. They got behind me, and I was like, are they gonna pull me over? Like, like, or am I gonna be able to just go? And so, um, it's just it's not a feeling that I feel that we should have in America. It's not like something where you feel like you have freedoms. Even, like I said, like I was wrong. Like, my tags were expired. I'm not gonna say that they weren't. I'm not trying to debate that or anything like that. But the way the officers went about it, I feel like wasn't. Um, I don't feel like it was very considerate, or I'm not sure what the word is I'm looking for. It's just it seemed a little too much.
Yeah, and I mean, coming from the white perspective, I mean, I think we all, anytime a police officer pulls behind us, we're kind of like, oh, did I do something?
Mm-hmm.
We ask that question. And 90% of the time, it's like, I didn't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not worried. From a black, especially a black man's perspective, um, it's a little bit more. And I mean, I I carry a concealed weapon with a permit, and when I do that and I give that card, usually the police officer goes, "Where's the gun? Where's this? Where's that?"
Mm-hmm.
And but never ever have they ever said, "Okay, I'm gonna need you to step out of the vehicle."
Mm-hmm.
Never ever have they escalated it beyond that. And this was trying to find the registration and even giving you permission to use a phone. So it
Mm-hmm.
was nothing of the sorts. And I was treated differently than your experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but growing up in this same neighborhood, what was your feeling towards the police? Did you feel like they were there to serve and protect, or was it always this cloud of, okay, they're watching me, I haven't done anything, what am I mean,
I feel like anytime I see the police and in the neighborhoods I grew up in, they're looking for people who are doing bad things.
mm-hmm,
Um, and a lot of times those people probably happen to be people who are close to me. Um, so it's just like you want to protect those people who you love dearly and who are close to you, even if what they're doing, isn't right. And that's just the culture I grew up in. It's just how it is. It's like, you protect those you love, even if it matters. With not saying certain things, right? Um, and I don't think it was ever an experience that I had that was um, positive with the police in my neighborhoods, except for Tommy Norman. He used to come by
mm-hmm.
sometimes and like hand out sodas and like chips in the summer. But
And I mean, he's a great example of
mhm,
one of those officers that goes above and beyond to want to know your name, want
mhm,
to know your story, want to just love on you. And even when he comes down on you, I mean, we've had to call him over here and say, "Hey, do you mind going over and checking on this family or whatever? We don't want them. They've done something. We don't want them to get in trouble, but we
exactly,
but we,
yeah.
we want to encourage them to make the right decision in
Mhm.
something like this." What difference does someone like that make in a community?
I think the first difference it makes is like it builds some trust between that the police department and the
Mm-hmm.
community. So growing up, a kid can see a police officer who actually like feels like they're a part of the community rather than feeling like there's somebody who's maybe coming in from a neighborhood on the other side of
Mm-hmm.
town to my neighborhood that really is my like what I feel like I own where I'm at. So who are these people to come into my place and tell me what I can or can't do, right? That's kind of the attitude I feel like I have towards it. I know like North Little Rock is a large community, but it just seems like a lot of the heavily policed areas are um, the African American communities, and I just don't. I know. Remember growing up, I saw a cop at least 2 to 3 times a day, just driving, just casually cruising. And those patrols, I don't know how it works or how they, monitor it, but I just never felt like they were there like to actually like be a part of the community. They were just kind of there, just like making sure, just kind of cruising through. And I don't feel like they felt like they were part of the community either because I don't feel like maybe they never took the time to get out to their car because they didn't know if they were going to be safe. They never
Mm-hmm.
took the time stop and talk to a person to see like, hey, what's up? You know, and I'm not saying every officer is like that or Officer Norman is the only one,
Mhm.
but those things can make a big difference, you know?
Well, and I think it's really kind of interesting here, um, because of where we are and all that. We have officers coming around here all the time,
Mm-hmm.
especially this particular neighborhood here in North Little Rock. But when you see Officer Norman pull up to the building,
Kids surround his car.
kids run too.
Mm-hmm.
In Little Rock, I've got a lot of kids that if they see a police officer, they run from, even if he's not there from them. It's totally different perspective,
Mm-hmm.
and it's one of those things. It's like, why can't we see more of it?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. It's to me, it's refreshing to see the kids over here in North Little Rock have a good respect for police officers and an understanding that I feel like these police officers that are here to serve and protect and engage in the community and all
Mm-hmm.
that. It's a lot of fun to see.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so in that and this story that you kind of share, is this a story that really resonates? I mean, growing up here with your friends, is this does this story, when you tell that to them, are they in shock?
Oh no, no, not at all. Actually, you know, I could just say some of the officers' names, and some of our friends are all like, "Oh yeah, I know them. They do stuff like that all the time." You know, like, and so, and that's what I told you. I took an Uber home. The Uber driver told me this was like, "Hey, Joe, just file a complaint. These guys probably have like a history of this, and eventually, you know, like it'll probably catch up to them." I had a friend, Kendrick, and he's dating a girl from Jersey or from Florida, and you know she's a white girl, right? And so they've been having to have a lot of these hard conversations too. And one thing he told me that she had told him is that she said, "I'd never been pulled over until I started dating you twice because he was in the car."
Mm-hmm.
Um, and he's told me about those incidences, and he told me that they came to his window and always like asked for his ID as well. So
As the passenger.
as the passenger, yes, as the passenger. And so like yeah, these the experiences aren't like they're not shocked, they're not surprised. It's just like almost like you know like well you made it out okay basically. That's the sad part is that we think like you made it out all right like or oh you only got a ticket you know so um, it's yeah, it's just not a lot of there's not a lot of trust there. There's not, and it's I wish there was because I think that the thing that's deterring more people from being police officers is that distrust from the community. Nobody really wants to like become a police officer if the community has like a certain attitude towards them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, this past week, I've had like at least 2 or 3 kids tell me like I want to be a police officer when I grow up, and I'm just like, you know, like they're. I don't want to say like don't do it, don't discourage them, but because I would love to see them do that and love to see you know more police officers of color representing us in our community because I feel like that also could make a difference. And I have seen a lot more like police officers of color in our community, and that's very encouraging to see. So, um, yeah, I don't think it's just a reality we have to live with. I think that we just are kind of stopped and expected to be fricks. We're expected to show our ID. We're expected to, you know, be compliant and up to the point where like basically we have to like literally forego all your rights to be like, all right, like, you know, is this America? You know, like, do I have to like, I'm walking through the street and you know you think I have a gun, like, so I have to, you have to frisk me down, you know, like, you know, I smell my car smells like weed, and so you have to pull me out and search my car. It's just the reality, and like you know, like I said, it's just when you make it out, like that's the success, and that's kind of a sad reality.
I mean, another funny story is just down from here. I was with Marius, and his truck quit going forward.
Mm-hmm.
It would only go in reverse, and so from the bridge on Main Street back over to here, we needed to get the truck here. So I drove in front of Marius
Out of Boys and Girls Club.
over by the Boys and Girls Club at the bottom of that bridge. Marius drove that truck in reverse all through the neighborhood to get back over here. We passed a cop. He didn't even look at us. Big white German guy, me in the car in front of him, and he didn't even give us a second look. And in Marius's truck was missing a headlight. I mean, it had issues. I mean, it wasn't in pristine condition. So, but it was just really interesting because both of us, we were on the phone talking as we were driving. He's like, "We're getting pulled over. We're going to jail." I mean, I'm driving down the road in reverse. You're in front of me. I mean, and it was nothing. And I look at so much of this craziness that goes on, and it's seeing cars based upon the quality of the car is more likely to get pulled over. Um, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've been stopped by a police officer and said, "Hey, your blinker's out," or "Hey, you got a headlight out," or whatever. You need to get that fixed. And then they run back to their car and drive on. And the stories with so many of the people, I mean, in some of our neighborhoods, it's like cars getting towed, getting a ticket. I mean, and it's just a warning. So I think one of the things that there's a big debate going on right now that's controversial is defund the police, abandon the police, or whatever, and all these words. And I don't understand the ramifications. But one of the things that I look at this is there's got to be some change. There's got to be something that changes, because one of the other things that breaks my heart is so much of the time, a lot of the policing and the ticketing impacts the poorest of the poor. I can't tell you. I know families that have lost their vehicle purely because of running out of gas, or something simple that happens to all of us, but because they were poor and it gets towed, and the tow fees and the yard fees and all this, I mean, they just lose their car. What's something practical you really believe that, and we could fix something, but whether it's a changing of an attitude or a training, or whatever, that could help make it better?
So I'm just gonna go back to that idea you were talking about defunding the police. Chance the Rapper had a little thing he put on Instagram the other day that like put it the best perspective for me. He said defunding the police seems like a bad idea until you realize they've been defunding education for years. And so
Mm-hmm.
I'm just like, and to me, I'm just like, so the defunding of police idea is really just an idea where they're thinking about putting less money into the police and more money into social or other services that could help benefit people with mental health issues, to help benefit people with poverty issues, to help benefit people with food insecurity issues, and so, or to help benefit teachers so they can buy school supplies. So like, I think that that idea is will probably gain a lot of traction, and probably like will actually be passed in a few states. But I think that the biggest change I would like to see is probably in our educational system, um, because the school to prison pipeline is very
Mm-hmm.
real, and it's happening a lot in like the poor communities, which are mainly minority communities as well, like you were saying. And so like I definitely want to see a change in just like more money and more effort going into those communities where the kids actually need more help, and rather than pulling those resources away from them and saying, well, this school is underachieving, or this school is under capacity, and then or they're not using their full capacity of their building, so we're going to move this money elsewhere. And so that's the biggest change I would like to see, is just like putting more into the schools, into the teachers, into like the people who are, creating our leaders. So that's that's kind of why I'm here, because
Right,
I
and
love.
I love that idea, because I mean, I think that um, when we invest in the positive,
Mm-hmm,
a lot of the negative falls off.
mm-hmm,
When we invest in creating opportunities, a lot of the things that people see as holding them back falls off. And
mm-hmm,
so I think anything we can do to create opportunities in a third grader's mind that, hey, I can go do this, I've got a future, because so much of the time the stupid decisions that I see among kids are because of hopelessness,
mm-hmm,
or because of hunger, or because of things that we as a country should be able to fix.
Mm-hmm.
John, thank you for educating me, and hopefully other people will hear this and understand that you're a real person. You're a real guy that I love and appreciate, and I see every day just killing it, loving on kids, encouraging their parents. You're also TikTok famous. I can't leave that out. And so just appreciate you and appreciate you taking the time. I know this was totally uncomfortable for you, but you did an awesome job.
Thanks, Drew. Thanks for having me today. I enjoyed it.